This episode of the Troxel Podcast is made possible with support from Arc IT. Are you tired of standard IT services that miss the mark? Choose Arc IT for specialized, proactive IT management, BIM support, and robust data security tailored for architects. Whether you're a team of 10 or a growing firm of 50 plus, Arc IT understands the architecture industry and will empower your unique creative vision to enable you to do your best work. Embrace a technology team that enhances, not hinders, your design process. Visit getarcit.com for your free IT assessment and start transforming your firm and your tech experience today. That's getarcit.com. Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. A little bit of housekeeping up front here before I introduce today's guests. I would very much appreciate your support of this podcast by subscribing wherever you watch or listen, so YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever that is. And please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can also support my mission by becoming a paid member at trxl.co, which is my website. Just click on the join button in the lower right-hand corner. And if you'd like to receive an email when these episodes are published with all of the show notes, which includes links and all of the other information, whenever they come out, you can sign up for that by becoming a free or paid member at trxl.co and clicking that join button. Okay, in this episode, I welcome Brian Nickel and Brett Settles of Allied BIM. Brian is the CEO and founder of Allied BIM, which is a pioneering firm that develops and delivers cutting-edge fabrication tools and solutions for Autodesk Revit and BIM 360 platforms. And he is an adjunct professor at Montana State University's College of Engineering and Gallatin College. Brett Settles is the product owner at Allied BIM, and he brings 20 years of experience implementing, managing, teaching, and using new technology in geospatial, mining, and AEC. In this episode, we discuss their latest work at the intersection of BIM and fabrication. We talk about the innovations the Allied BIM team has created that link design intent directly to the machines on the floor in the shop. Brian and Brett share their insights on the evolution of BIM technology, the importance of user-friendly web-based platforms, and the role of training and VR in remote management. Today, we discuss real-world applications and the future of construction automation, making a compelling case for the transformative potential of their work. You'll hear about how Allied BIM is bridging the gap between design intent and on-site execution, and you'll learn about their vision for the future of the critical link between design and the trades. This was a fantastic conversation with Brian and Brett, and I hope you'll not only find value in it for yourself, but that you'll help add value to our industry by sharing it with your network. So now, without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Brian Nickel and Brett Settles. Today I'm joined by Brian and Brett from Allied BIM, and I want you guys to actually give an intro to what you've been up to. We had the chance to connect at Autodesk University. It was a jam-packed schedule. We squeezed it in just in time. But it's incredible what you guys are working on at Allied BIM. And I thought it would be a cool story to tell because I know you've been working really hard on this directive fabrication stuff. Everything that you've built is absolutely incredible. And there's so much information there. I don't know how deep we'll end up going today. But first, welcome to the show, both of you. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
Well, Brian, maybe you kick us off because we've known each other the longest and been aware of kind of what's going on both sides of our worlds. And we're not actually that far apart anymore. I moved to Oregon, you're out of Boise, and Montana. You're kind of splitting time, right? But maybe you can get a little bit into that and tell people what you've been up to for the past few years.
Yeah. No, thanks, Evan, for bringing us onto the show, and definitely known each other for quite some time. My name's Brian Nickel. I'm the CEO of Allied BIM. We started Allied BIM actually based out of a prefab shop in Bozeman, Montana. I was a second-year architecture student studying architecture. That's kind of where we have some commonalities, is our architecture backgrounds. But what was interesting is just learning the process and sort of the pain points in an actual fabrication shop of, what the disconnect was from model to machine software. at the time in 2014, there was not a lot of applications that allowed us to easily transmit data to those machines. And so, long story short, we developed Allied BIM. We raised a substantial amount of capital from Arco Murray Ventures, along with some other private ventures as well. And what's really exciting about it is we brought Brett Settles on board, who's our product owner. And I'll let Brett introduce himself here in a minute as well. But we've come together just in this last year, and we really started to drive the industry on the electrical side. And we're looking forward to doing that on mechanical and plumbing as well. So really brief background there. I'll go ahead and let Brett introduce himself.
Yeah. So thanks for having me, Evan. And I've been here at Allied BIM for closing in on a year now. So started at the very beginning of the year. My background is really kind of dipping in and out of industry. When I'm in industry, my history really revolves around industrial engineering and construction management. So the shop hasn't always been my forte. It's more about workflows, software, user experiences. So for me, this whole journey into Allied BIM has not only been something I feel like I've been able to help with, but also something that's been an extremely valuable learning process for me. Not only for what we're doing, but also for essentially the way I understand it if I ever end up anywhere else in the industry. So
I just want to jump in here real quick, Brett, because what you just said is super intriguing to me. And I think a lot of times firms, I'll come at this from kind of an architectural firm perspective, they're looking to fill a role with somebody who has all the knowledge already, right? And they're going to be able to bring that knowledge to the firm and disperse it amongst the staff of the firm to win projects, to deliver projects, whatever the role may entail, right? But what you just said was, like, this was not your forte, right? To come in and like bridge the gap to the shop, right? From software to the shop. And I find it super interesting. Like, number one, like, you saw this as a really interesting challenge for your own professional development. And that Brian, you saw that he could do it and that at the same time. He didn't come with all of that at the get-go. And so a little bit of a detour here. I would love to hear from both of you, because I don't think that that's very common, like what you just described. Like, a lot of times we're looking for the resume, or, the job posting always says 10 years, 5 years, 7 years of experience, like doing all of these things. And what you're saying is, like, you were going to figure it out here, and you were the right guy to do it, obviously, because Brian said you're the right guy to do it. So talk us through kind of how that little piece happened, and then we'll get back to how you guys
I'm
got
actually going to hit on that because so Brett, I was actually Brett's third customer at a company called Revisto. So I back in 2015, I believe, is when I met Brett for the first time, possibly even 2014. And we were just a small company. And I said, Brett, I'd love to use your software, but it's too expensive, right? And Brett's like, I'm going to come in and we're going to figure this out. And we figured it out. And what happened through that experience was I actually got to see Brett's customer service and customer care on a product owner standpoint. And I got to see what he was doing with that product, and I got to see how he was evolving that product, and really how he grew Revisto in from my perspective, just sitting non-software guy at the time, like just using software to build buildings, right? And that really got my hopes up for the industry because I knew that he was putting that extra level of care in it. So he ended up coming to Reality Capture Network conference about a year ago. It was not this current one. It was the one last year. And it was in November. And it was Reality Capture Network's done by Matt Bird. He's a really good friend of mine, really good advocate in the industry. And Brett came by our booth. We actually were boothing an Allied product at the time. And I saw him, and Brett had switched over to a company called Penta Engineers. And seeing Brett go from the software industry back to the traditional role of engineering as CTO, I'm like, why did you do that, Brett? Like, you're so valuable for the software side. Like, have you ever considered like coming and working for a software company like Allied? And he's like, I might be interested. Let's have a conversation. And Brett, I think that's pretty much how the conversation went. And then within 30 days or 45 days, we had Brett Settles on board, and he's done tremendous things just in the last 11 months this year.
Well, I'm flattered, of course. And yeah, I mean, I started off my career in GIS surveying and civil, really gravitated towards Revit and BIM, was really kind of put to task during the housing crisis, selling software in a very hurt economy, right? So low staff, lots of responsibility, which greatly helped my career development. And then got into industrial CM. So I was really working with prefabrication from an engineering point of view, and then even a construction management point of view in the field. In industrial, we're working with large ducts, large kilns. They get shipped on trucks. They're pre-assembled, right? It's actually pretty common in that industry. And the one thing that I had never done is seen what happens after I order things and when they show up on site. And this job has really not only let me kind of get inside of those doors, but really kind of what I feel like is bring a fresh perspective on software user experience to a group of people that are experienced in the industry that we serve. And I'm learning pretty rapidly, right? They're, coming in. I honestly feel like I probably know more about software or conduit bending than I probably should. But that's right. Just how it works out,
Yeah. Side effect of the job.
Exactly.
Well, Brian, maybe you can give us kind of a short story of where Allied BIM has come from to get where you are now, just to give people a bigger understanding of because Allied BIM, I mean, obviously you're focused on BIM, right? And so maybe give us an idea of the transition, where you've been, and then what you're transitioning into currently or have been working on.
Yeah, absolutely. So in 2004, I started actually at Santiago High School in Southern California, which was not too far from where you were. I believe you were in Ontario,
right,
working for a firm down there.
Right.
But what was interesting is we learned Revit 6.0, and I was in Bill Brown's class, was my high school teacher. And I loved Revit the moment that I opened it. Like, it was just it was fun. I grew up a huge video gamer, got into Revit. And I'm like, I'm being paid to play video games now. And what I didn't realize at the time until I went through architecture school and ultimately moved to Montana, I'm an alum from Montana State University with a Master's of Architecture, and going to Montana, and what I didn't understand was the connection of what was beyond the traditional blueprints for architecture and engineering, right? And so I saw this ad, ironically enough, this was 2014, in a newspaper, okay? And I see this little clip that says hiring Revit MEP specialists. And I'm like, that's interesting because I happen to be in a building systems class and I feel really uncomfortable with building systems right now. Mm-hmm. It would be, what better way to learn mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems than using Revit, which I love to do, and learning how to model it. And so go in for an interview. I meet Bob Harvey, who's now my business partner. And I interviewed with him, and I found out his wife was a professor actually at my college. And I initially declined the job because I didn't want to get like a conflict due to the fact that, I'm in school and I'm working for your husband type thing. And he called me back and he goes, I don't care about that. Come work for me. Like, just come work for me. Bear in mind, I was not heavily in the industry yet. I was more or less just like a student, doing some architecture jobs, very, very basic drafting stuff. And what Bob started to proceed to do was explain his vision for how a model should connect to a specialty contractor. And what was enlightening about it was the amount of volume in just supplies, the amount of volume in materials, the amount of waste in materials, the general complexity of the projects that they were doing. And at the time in 2014, when we were modeling with system families, if you open up like a Revit MEP system family for an elbow, and you'll see that the connectors just don't work. Like, you can't get linear cuts. It's not a fabrication element. And so coincidentally enough, and total fate, I think. And it was just sheer coincidence. 2015, they roll out MEP fabrication parts inside of Revit. And at that moment, they had adjusted these connectors to be able to actually Legify your building. Like you could actually like go coupling to pipe to coupling, and it knew what the distances were because it was spec driven, right? It was driven off of the actual product specification. And the light bulb went off right there. I'm like, this is incredible. Because my first task was, hey, draw this so my guys can build it. Because I have to draw these isometrics and I have to explain it. And I've got 40 plumbers, and I tell one plumber to do it this way and this plumber to do it that way. And they all do it 1,500 different ways. And I want to create consistency for better quality. And so, kind of speeding this story up a little bit, what was interesting is as the tools began to evolve, my comprehension of their specialty trades started to evolve. And so I was working with master plumbers, and they would explain, okay, this is how this all goes together. And I'm just a dumb old architecture student, right? Like I'm just designing buildings. And what they were doing was they were teaching me how to construct the MEP systems. And so as I learned how to do that, we were able to, Bob came into my office in 2016. He goes, hey, I'm thinking about buying this linear positioning system. I'm like, what the heck is that? He's like, well, it goes on the back of a saw and there's some automation on it. And I was like, that would be amazing because I can give you the list and then we could go cut it. Right? And so long story short, we bought that. We got the equipment in place and we realized some major deficiencies. We're like, I got to export an Excel file. I got to tell Johnny in the back, like, hey, you're going to cut this list. And Johnny doesn't know how to operate a computer. And he's like overwhelmed. He's like, I'm just going to pull a tape measure and cut it. And so I got to see that. And I went up to Bob one day in 2017 and I said, let's develop our own solution. We tried other Gen 1 solutions on the market at that time. And I said, let's build our own product, which at the time I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, we just need to build our own software to do what you want it to do. And so we ended up hiring out a development team. We ended up building out the process and kind of building the initial framework. Bear in mind, this was all strictly for Revit. And so what we ended up doing is in 2019, Forge rolls out. And I'm like General Akbar from Star Wars. I'm like, this is a trap. This is a nightmare. Like it's going to ruin my Revit tools. Here we go. Well, I met with Jim Fonsi at Autodesk and he goes, Brian, it's not a trap. It's actually a great product. And we're building it for this purpose. And we want to learn more about why you're building what you're building and how we can incorporate it into this whole APS lifecycle. And so 2020 pandemic hit. I ended up kind of going to Bob and we're like, well's drying up. We got to go present this and pitch this and let's start going the VC route. And we start going the VC route and we ended up raising $2.25 million in a seed. And that really helped us get the traction that we needed now. So we're doing very well at Allied. And it allowed us to bring on Brett, and we've fully evolved the system to be a web-based fabrication workflow platform, where now we can take a Revit model from design, whether it's conceptual all the way through fabrication ready, directly out to the machine.
And I know that was long. No, that's cool. I think one thing I even want to expand on it, because when you say like you machine ready, like you showed me, and we're going to have a link to a separate video that you're going to put up that shows people what that actually means, because it's more than just like file export, right? And so
exactly.
Take a second and just talk about what that actually means, because I think it actually puts you in the shoes of, or at least it gives you a footing in the shop when you're actually building these cut lists and you're working in this interactive model, but you're also directly connected to the shop to see the output, which then I would assume informs kind of both sides of that equation, so that you get a tighter connection not just between the transfer of data, but also the people who are doing this job.
Yeah, no, what was happening in the beginning was the communication breakdown of putting it onto a USB stick, handing it to them, walking it to the back shop, putting it into the computer, and then fighting the computer to organize the list. In fact, not even being able to pack optimize the materials accurately to mitigate waste. It was just cutting stuff. We reached a point where, a tail end of the stick, they were nearly chopping their fingers off on the saw just out of the box, right? And so leading and segueing into what you're talking about, Evan, where we've gone model connected to machine. Now the design modeler can publish for fabrication, link the machine to the actual model that they're going to be building from, and translate and organize the data in a way that's safer, more efficient, less wasteful, and just overall faster. We're seeing an 8x improvement speed over what a traditional thumb drive export is. And let's face it, we all hate exporting and importing data. It's the worst thing ever, right?
Well,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Brian. Well, one of the things that I was going to bring up, and I think it's so important with software, and it's something that I kind of bring across most of my jobs with me, and it's something I remembered really vividly from doing it, is context switching, right? No matter what job you do, the idea of saying, all right, I've got this, shut this system down, now open it back up in this system, is a very jarring experience no matter what you're doing. And so whenever we were tackling, coordination software, we focused on where is the context switching and how do we make that smooth handoff? And I think fabrication and its link to the BIM world suffers from that greatly right now. And the more you smooth that out, in addition to reduce the menial tasks that people do, the more value you get, right? So, and there's a lot of opportunity for that here. So we're kind of taking the low hanging fruit first and then, working our way up that tree.
And you talked about kind of this idea of, I'm going to put context switching even in context, because you talked about workflows earlier, right? And so the idea, like in an architectural workflow, there's a lot of context switching, right? It's like I'm going from this tool, export, import into this tool, export, import, like wait, like there's all these different context switching things that are going on because, when I back in the day, right? It's like we had to wait for certain things. You had to wait for the thing to export. You had to wait for Photoshop to pre-process the image before it could actually process the image. You remember that in Photoshop? We had like a progress bar for like what it was thinking about what it was going to do before the real progress bar of actually doing what it was going to do when you applied the filter or whatever, or preparing to save. That's what I'm thinking of. Photoshop used to tell us it was preparing to save. Right.
That's great.
But then even rendering, like it used to take hours, right? And so to your point about like keeping this workflow in, like, I don't know what you would call it. It's just like this one system,
like
right?
A stream.
Keeping it connected, right?
Yeah.
Like there's so many disconnects from design, even on the receiving side of a specialty contractor from the design side. There's a lot of rework, constant rework that's done, right? And that's all driven based on, that particular specialty contractor that's going to put whatever content they build into their model. But the moment that you can start to control that connection between what has been published versus what is being produced and connect that back to the models to give the designer a status of progress, you can now accelerate that production. An example of this was Williams Plumbing and Heating in Bozeman. They were doing 10 model assemblies, spool drawings, which for those viewers that are listening, or for the audience, a spool drawing is really just a fabrication drawing. So for somebody to be able to have instructions like a Lego sheet to build. So they'd get 10 assemblies or 10 Lego kits to build. And what we were able to do by creating that connection was accelerate it on day 2 to 20, on day 3 to 40. And on day 4, they were like, okay, we're ready to go 80. We're going to just do 80. And that's where we get our 8x production number from, is them accelerating the number of spool books or spool fabrication drawings that they can produce. And so it's all about that connection. Really.
Yeah. But then the other kind of side effect of that, like how is it possible? I mean, and I'm just kind of stepping back and from a manufacturing standpoint, for a manufacturer to say, let's go 8 times faster and it's safer. Like that's just got to be kind of another level of disconnect. It's like, how's that even possible?
Yeah. And that's a really good point that you bring up. They're like, you're so full of shit. Like, there's no way that you're going to be able to make it 8x faster and safer. And it's like, no, we actually are controlling a work cell, which enables us to have a less skilled worker operate it. It actually attracts the less skilled worker to the trades where we have a massive trade shortage right now. You know, I do a poll. I teach at Montana State University in my Revit class. I teach the construction engineering technology students. I do a poll. How many people are familiar with the trades? On average, I have about 75 to 100 students a semester. I average about 5 students that even know what the trades are. And so what I do as they go through my Revit class is I kind of explain, you know, here's the options that you have to you. Here's why it's so attractive to check it out. And with that, it's like, now we've made the machine safer. We're using a machine that's easier to teach somebody than it is to even pull and read and interpret a tape measure to mark with a Sharpie, because now they can punch in the dimension that they want and the system does it on its own, and it's less hands-on. So in a traditional shop, you've got guys out like skill sawing or using a chop saw. That's a lot of manual labor. With these fully automatic machines, you literally push a foot pedal and it does it on its own, and then it advances it on its own. So now you're not having to pull a tape, set a backstop, pull a tape, set a backstop, and advance. I remember from my woodworking class how frustrating that was, right? And so to your point, Evan, it's all about the safety, the training of the skilled trade laborer, like being enticed to want to come work in the trades, right? Because now we've got this digitally connected system. And it's pretty interesting. Brett, you can probably add a little more to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I have been connected in my life with people that have worked in a more traditional manufacturing environment, right? And I've been in those shops, not near as much as I've been in these sort of contractor AEC shops. And, you know, there's a couple big things that you guys bring up. One is the safety. In order to use a brake press in some of the shops I've been in, you have to be standing on a pad and push 2 buttons with both your hands, right? Meaning that you have no extremities available to get stuck in the machine, right? It is not possible. As to where you make a site visit like what we did last week, there's nothing wrong with what was happening, but the opportunity for injury is higher because of the nature of the tools being used. Skill saw in hand, you know, dusty floor, situations that are very common in construction. And so what we learned is in the visit we just made, you can actually prefabricate your cuts and add 2 people back to the labor crew building and remove them from the dangerous situation. And keep that all in one workflow. And so it's really an organizational value proposition that has to be explained in multiple ways because it gives everyone value. Not to get too sidetracked there, but hopefully that kind of helps kind of our thought process there.
That's super interesting to kind of think about the business that you're actually affecting, right? Like you're not just affecting process, you're actually affecting the way that they can conduct their business from a labor standpoint and where those labor units are applied in the shop versus out on the site doing installation versus that prefabrication. I think that's really interesting. And so like just building on that theme for a minute, tell me like how those conversations go. Like you just said, you usually have to explain it multiple different ways. What do you hear as kind of the objections and the pushback throughout that process and that you're kind of overcoming through that conversation?
Yeah. You know, usually I have 2 conversations with almost all clients, depending on, and this goes for a lot of different verticals, GCs, subcontractors. And the two conversations are first with the technical team. What are we trying to achieve from a technical standpoint? And then the second is a buy-in from the people that are actually doing the work. And those are two very different conversations, right? The first one is a very advanced, lots of acronyms being thrown around, lots of terminology that if you're not in this industry, you're not going to understand what we're talking about, right? As to where when we go to the field, Brian and I went to a field visit last week, and we met with the superintendent. We said, just explain to us, what's the most important thing to you? And he said, going fast, speed. Safety is always number one concern, but second to that is speed.
I mean,
right?
safety. Yeah.
Yes. He did say safety first. I reversed it on him, but
okay.
It was one of those things where we thought it was going to be a very technological process. And it turned out to be a very simple one where he said, all I need are these certain types of parts marked and cut and labeled and brought out to site. We will do everything else. That will accelerate our process. And so does he understand that assemblies are being created, files are being processed? We're post-processing PDFs into the parts that he's getting delivered. He knows none of that. All he knows is that he's going to get a package that tells him where those parts go. And that was where he was like, oh, that's nice.
What they want, Evan, is they want the big fat red "that was easy" button. And that's what we're trying to build in the platform to make it simple for them to use, to where they don't need to necessarily know what's happening on the back end. They're just getting the lists and the files and the organizations so that they can produce and build the building faster.
Yeah,
Brian, and oh, go ahead, Evan. Sorry.
I was just going to say, it makes sense that you want it on the surface to be simple, and you want it to be approachable and intuitive, and it feels good, and the complexity is below the surface, and it's difficult to build software and processes that are actually like that, right? I mean, I'm sure you've gone through a lot of iterations to actually get to that point. Like, what do you put on the surface? What do you hide below the surface so that the overwhelm doesn't happen?
Yeah, what the hardest part was realizing that so when we segued at Harvey's from building it internally for a company to selling it to other companies, that was the most difficult thing for us to overcome. Is you build something initially for your operations and it has purpose for the internal operations. But how do you blow the lid off of that and make it accessible to everybody? And we've successfully done that because we learned through trial and error how to do that. And one of the best parts was once we built that web environment, it became understandable of how it was all going to tie in to where we didn't have to worry about what parameters were in the Revit model anymore. We can now map data through our platform to the equipment that we've built on the back end. And that's what's really powerful about it. I mean, Brett brought up the tube bending side. These CNC tube benders, I showed a video just a few moments ago, but these CNC tube benders are traditionally built for the aerospace industry. So like SpaceX, NASA, like JPL, those kinds of companies typically use this, and automotive. And those companies are batch producing the same part over and over and over again for each aircraft. In our world, we're building new buildings over and over again, but it's nothing but variation. No two projects are the same unless they're actually the same, right? And even then, I would say 95% or more of all projects are constantly different, done by different people. And so one of the other battles that we've built into the layer is we were able to make this machine handle, and all machines that we work with, handle that variation with our construction industry. So now it doesn't matter if it's building the same part over and over again, or if you have 150 million different parts.
Interesting.
What's interesting about that is that is also a requirement of that, and the ability to act on variation very quickly is a result of the connection to the model. If we go back to the beginning of our conversation, when Brian was talking about, generating a USB and taking it to a saw. Well, at the point where that USB is put into your hand, anything on that model that changes is unknown to you, right? In this environment, it doesn't feel different. You're still getting a cutlass, but that cutlass can be changed based on decisions made that are out of your control and further up the process.
Yeah. I want to go back to that easy button idea, because I think that a lot of things that fabrication struggles with is the design side, not understanding what a model that is ready for fabrication really means. Correct. I've heard this from on the timber side, on the Greg Howes over at Cut My Timber. He's talked about that a lot. Like the vocabulary of the design side isn't there. The knowledge on the design side isn't there. The understanding of how the tooling works, what the processes are. And so I'm just wondering, like, when you are bridging the gap between design and fabrication, talk about kind of, okay, so you're intentionally keeping stuff below the surface, you're bringing stuff up so that people can see certain things, but you're really talking about that from the operator side at the moment, right? You're talking about the fab shop. But Correct. From the design side, talk about it from that direction too, and like what architects and design teams need to know about the process that they are, because I think they think it's an easy button. They actually assume the easy button already exists, and I'm just chucking this model over the fence and it's all good. And that's not the case, right?
No, it's actually interesting that you bring this up, because my thought process on this has changed so many times over the last couple of years. I was a really disgruntled architecture student coming out of school. I was disgruntled because my mindset was, we're going to be the master builder. We're going to know everything that goes into the building. We're master designers, right? We know how to master plan and master layout and put together construction CD sets that we can convey and get permitted. And that's going to get bid through the GC, and they're going to go build that project. And what we've seen and what we've done really well with our platform is, once it goes out to the subcontractors, they're the master of their craft in installing those things. And that creates a nice separation, because now in a modeling standpoint, starting with system families where you're going through and you're doing spaghetti, right? Like you're just modeling, generic sizes, doing your collision detections, just validating that things are fit and systems are going to go. I look at it more kind of like the Russian dolls, like stacking dolls concept, where it's like, architect gave us, the whole set. We're going to take that one off and drill in a little bit further. We're going to drill in a little bit further to that. And then eventually, you figure out how they've all stacked together. Right. And I think, what we've seen and what we've been able to do is Revit has regulated and controlled that to some degree. The specialty contractors that are using Revit didn't have the tools 10 years ago to make a manufactured model, right? And over the last decade, there's been solutions that have come out, and the industry's really evolved into creating higher level precision models. The problem is the time that goes in to build those models, fighting Revit, and how large those models are. And so the exciting part about the web for us is it no longer even has to be modeled technically in Revit. We can actually digitally manufacture, from a model that's generated in the web. And so that's kind of exciting, because if I could take the blueprints and the engineered models that are, call it, magnified level of detail, right? It's not microscopic level. It's just magnified a little bit. We've got enough detail in there. And then make it microscopic through an upload and process it and generate it and fabricate it. That's really where this industry's headed is, with all this, for better or worse, adoption of AI, there is the opportunity for us to publish, generate, and manufacture, right? So just kind of, it's changed where in our today's industry, it's plan, design, send a model, receive model, remodel, fight Revit, export,
You
hand
forgot
key.
to fight Revit in the earlier part too.
I should have put it earlier. Fight Revit.
That's at
I
every
do love
step.
Revit. I do love Revit, but we fight it a lot.
You know, I talk about this with clients all the time, and I first recognized it when I stepped into the construction industry, when I realized that the models that were being used were generally authored by the subcontractors and not the designers. When early in my career, I always thought the subcontractors model would be an evolution of the design model, not a complete rework of the design model. And what we've discovered over the years, and I'm not talking anything that anybody doesn't know, is that there's now, and I've used this comment in other parts of the industry, there's essentially a subatomic of tools that float in this space of taking an engineering level detail model and taking it to something that can be built. That was never addressed in the native software. And there is now a whole bunch of tools that do that on top of Revit. But as technology has gone on, now we're questioning is Revit the best place? And we'll use some base level AI talk here. And
very base.
Preface this. This could absolutely be described as rule-based automation. But if I'm an engineering person and I say, I want 50 foot of conduit, right? From point A to point B, from this box to this box. Everybody in this project knows that that's going to have to be chopped into 5, 10-foot sticks, and couplings are going to have to be placed there. Everybody, the engineers, the construction workers, everybody. But we still have to go into Revit and say, cut it here. What coupling do you want? I want this coupling. Put it here. Why? Right? Those are all things that we all know has to happen. And when we look at like rule-based AI type stuff, those are the types of things I think that us as an industry should be looking at is that the things that we all know is going to happen. Yeah. And leave the hard stuff to the people. And so that's why that part of the industry is big in flux, is because there are tools to fit that gap, but they are very human driven.
One follow-up point to that you made, Brett, that kind of relating it to the architecture industry. Do you remember when like Lumion came out for the first time?
I love that.
And they're like, they're like, how can we make rendering sustainable? Right? Do you remember when we were spending all of our budget rendering, and then Lumion came along, and then it gave us more budget to actually focus on the model? Right.
I went from 8 tower PCs running a whole weekend to running Lumion in 15 minutes to achieve the same result.
Exactly. And that's what we want to do for the fabrication industry. It's that same concept, is like, instead of spending, 90,000 hours or whatever it is, 100,000 hours, whatever it may be on a project, modeling, slicing every coupling, let's spend more time manufacturing and getting awarded more projects so that we can build more buildings and sell more buildings. These guys that we met with last week are building massive data centers all throughout the United States. And what's exciting to me about it is not only is our core principle of automating the trades to build more buildings, but the buildings that they're building are actually powering the system that we're relying on to build the software as well. So it's kind of exciting to see that kind of transpire.
It is interesting to me to think about it from this standpoint of the complaints that I was hearing about, like, the design team doesn't know enough to be effective on the design side before it gets thrown over the fence and then it magically works itself out. But the reason it magically works itself out is because the trades are doing a deep dive, rebuilding everything from scratch because they have the expertise, right? It totally actually makes sense, because Revit, any CAD, any hand drawing for that matter, was design intent, right? Architects think in assemblies, they don't think in components for the most part, right? Floors, ceilings, walls, we think in categories. I mean, if you want to think about it that way, right? And it always made sense. I remember when I started when it was on paper, and it was like MEP was single line diagrams, right? It was single line diagrams. Like there was no way all of that information needed to get front loaded onto the designer. Number one, they didn't know what those pieces and parts needed to be because we're not component experts. But number two, like a lot of that was just actually figured out in the field. There was no prefab like point on the timeline, right?
Art of the trade.
It was the art of the trade, and you could rely on that, and that was part of like the handshake that happened there, and it wasn't adversarial, right? It was like a necessary piece of the puzzle stepped in when they needed to be there. And what I'm hearing from you guys is like that's actually still possible here, because I shouldn't, as a Revit operator, need to know that the EMT needs to cut down into 10-foot sections, and we need to use this coupling, which is specified here from this pull-down menu, and I got to pick it and all that. No, like that's what software is really good for, right? And that to me is actually reassuring that we can actually make even simpler front-end design software that is a joy to use, which everybody knows the current software is actually not a joy to use, right? It's with that we've talked about fighting it, right? And we see a lot of potential in that part of the industry right now with people who are developing some really incredible stuff. But the reason is like that's because our value is not in doing that deep dive that early. Like it would be great if the software said, "Hey, red flag right here, something you need to address something." But I don't necessarily need to know what those things are until I need to know what those things are, right? I mean, is this crazy talk, or are you nodding your head in agreement?
I live it. I wear it every day. I lost all my hair from pulling it out using those tools, right? It's like how many times have we sat there and we've just been like, oh my gosh, why do I have to do this again? It totally makes sense what you're saying, and what I'm really enjoying about this conversation is from your perspective, I'm actually thinking about it in a different way than I have prior to this. And it's really exciting for me because, hearing your thought process on it, and then you're kind of more on that design side out to construction. We're kind of more on that specialty side. And what these software providers have been doing is they're kind of stuffing that and forcing these architects and engineers to learn the constructability side. But it just doesn't need to happen, right? We can allow the software to do that translation for us. And that's kind of the exciting part about what Brett and I are building here.
But that sounds like a very recent development, right? Like that the software and the hardware have kind of come together at this moment of like really great capability to be able to do that, because I think that was just a big cloudy mess for a long time.
Totally. I mean, just we've done several pivots, as most startups have. Our last pivot was probably about 2 years ago, prior to building the electrical segment out. And I got to give major credit to Kyle Sponseller from C&R Electric, because he came in as this really young, but master electrician, professional engineer. So not only did he know how to design it, but he also built it. So he's kind of that master electrician that knows how to build it. And so he kind of informed the process. He's like, let's mark the material. Let's cut the material in an automated fashion. Let's bend it automatically. Let's reduce it down. In some of the examples that we show online, the bends on 4-inch EMT that are going into data center work take about 15 minutes to do it the manual way, the traditional way. And
per bend, right?
With the automation, we can do it in less than 15 seconds per bend. So it's pretty wild to see, that translation. What that translates to me is being able to do more projects, do more bends, produce more work.
Yeah. On one level, though, you are talking about retooling the trades, right? And I'm just curious, like how, so I mean, there's been conversations led by software companies previously about retooling AEC, and this is really the C side, right? And you even have kind of the pre-construction side if we're talking about prefab kind of offsite fabrication, right? So talk about that side of it and what the appetite is for retooling the trades, because now you're actually talking about less people running the machines. The machines are way smarter. You have a lot less waste. You have less like there's all of these things kind of floating around that conversation. But what is the appetite for that conversation?
So when we came into this showing the moonshot, which was the whole entire work cell, which is like auto marking, auto cutting, auto bending, we're asking for a pretty substantial investment into equipment to retool that shop. They're looking at a work cell that's anywhere from $650,000 to $1.2 million, depending on what they put into it. These guys are used to using, 881s, 555s, 747s, and a hand bender. All of the tools that range from $100 to $8,500, upwards of maybe $30,000 to $50,000, depending on what type of machine they're using. And so what we've had to do, and what Brett pointed out, which I think was absolutely brilliant, is we've had to actually scale the product to what the existing trades do today. So now there's an option. Are you a manual shop? Do you do manual work? Great, we have a tool for you. Hey, are you a semi-automatic shop? Yes, I am. I use a little bit. I want to start with cutting. I want to start with marking. We have a way to do that. And then there's the whole, like big end goal of manufacturing, a manufacturing work cell for electricians. And we have that too. And so it's interesting because as you're developing your product, we were very visionaries. Like as the founders we're like, we need to get out here.
Go all the way.
Right. Yeah, go all the way here. And then people are like, you're absolutely out of your mind. You're all the way out there. Like what's going on? And then we've met, we're currently working with the top 50 ENR 100 electricians, and we're in about 10 to 15% of those currently today. And what's wild is as Brett came on board, and Brett can speak to this, as he started to scale it back, it's been easier to kind of lay out the breadcrumbs to get them into understanding how there's a bigger picture to do full automation.
Before you jump into that, Brett, because I want to hear that. I just want to add one extra thing is that to me, what this seems like it would do for you is help you build relationships with your customers, because you're not just going all the way. It's like, let's start here. And then once you're ready, we can go to the next step. And then once you're ready, we can go to the next step. That seems to me like a much more sustainable business model, right? For Allied.
We're not just giving them a platter and saying, here, feast, right? Like, it's like, we're going in there and listening and understanding what their pain points are. We're responding to those pain points in our development and making that development suitable for anybody so that we can build a better relationship over time. This trip to Atlanta at Inglet and Stubbs last week was one of the most eye-opening experiences, because they truly understood, hey, we're not ready to cut right now. We don't want to deal with cutting. We just want to start with the bender, right? Let's get the bender roll. And after we finished the bending work cell, they're like, okay, you've proven the bender works. Let's get the cut stations roll. Let's
makes it easy
automate.
To go to the next step, right?
Yeah.
No, it's really interesting because we have a client that is just as forward thinking, same exact industry, and they chose to go the other way, where they're like, we're going to cut and mark first, and we're going to bend the old way. And they are now like, okay, let's get these benders going. There are two big things I'd like to touch on over that conversation arc that you guys had. One is that, do we get pushback in certain areas of the country that say, hey, you're kind of encroaching on jobs or something of this nature? Yes, people have brought that up, but there's a couple of things. There is a skilled labor shortage. And what that requires is for the industry as a whole to market to young people and their interests, right? However that may be. And I'm not a marketing expert, But I can tell you that whenever I go to career fairs, if I stick to we're electricians, we bend conduit, or, we're industrial engineers, we break up rocks, people walk on by. But if I have a VR headset and an interactive way for them to engage with the type of work that they're doing, then you get that engagement. So there's one aspect of getting new people on, but then there's the other aspect of that same skilled shortage, in that we don't have 50 electricians running around that know how to do all this stuff. We have much less than we have ever had. And we also don't have a good entry level position for people in this industry. What better than a safety oriented environment to hire in an art operator to work under a journeyman electrician to learn the ropes of this of not only the way electricity is installed in our country and in the world, but, learn from someone that's got that experience while they still provide value. To me, it seems like a huge win all the way around. And, people that make that leap are finding that to be pretty valuable in those regards.
You mentioned VR, and I know, Brian, you've got like this really interesting kind of, I don't know, I want to call it a workflow, I guess, for the meantime, but explain kind of the thing that, like, build on what Brett was just talking about, like the type of software that you've done that's enabled through the web, but gives you a view, a window into the shop itself, and kind of this immersive experience that you guys have created, which is more than just like, because I think maybe what people think is, okay, Revit to Excel is maybe what people are thinking
100%.
when they're thinking about what you're talking about, but it's not that at all.
No, 100%. In what as we orchestrated, and what APS, what Autodesk Platform Services, like, I'm going to plug them. It's a shameless plug for them, but I'm plugging them because I actually believe in them and they helped us a lot. And what they kind of showed us was that now that we have all the model data information accessible through this environment, now we can actually communicate beyond what the generation one set of tools did. Now we can actually start to create this linkage to the equipment to be able to manufacture. So what I did is I just tried it out. I'm like, the MetaQuest 3's out, bought a MetaQuest 3. They're really pretty inexpensive, $600, right? Throw the thing on, open up a web browser. I opened up our Fabrication Connected software, and I was like, wait a minute. So we have some proprietary software that runs on the machine that I can connect to. Let's see if it connects from the headset. And so I go in and I log into our Ring camera on our shop that's up in Bozeman, Montana. I'm based in Boise, Idaho. So being, at the shop through the headset on the machine is like really important to me because I can work with it. I can actually, in the VR environment, I can touch it because it's got hand tracking. So I can actually tap and learn it through the headset. And what it did is it actually real time through the internet ran the machine. It cycled the machine. I was able to load materials from my home office in Boise to the machine there. Our development team's on the other side of the globe. They're remoting in and controlling the machine digitally now. And so where that all came from was the skilled trade gap. And I know that's a whole other subject, but I'm going to keep it real simple. I experienced it. My business partner is 60-plus-year-old master plumber. Okay. He's retired. He's got 35 years of experience all up here. How does he teach that emerging generation how to actually use it? And I believe it's through VR or, these glasses. Meta just talked about these new, I think it's called Osiris or something like that. Or Iris. You basically put these glasses on and it's pass-through technology that overlays all the screens while you're walking through society. They're like $10,000. They're really expensive right now.
Yeah, they're not for sale.
But I envision I envision these guys popping in on our headsets and seeing through our eyes on the job site and actually instructing us how to build and model. And as things start to get more intuitive with VR, like imagine being able to open a toolkit and start modeling out your systems on site, like just with real content, and then manufacturing that on the equipment, right? It's not even modeling the building anymore. It's just going out on site and just, here, I want this here. Send it to the shop. They're going to ship it to the site. I'll install it. It's wild. So that's kind of the vision I see with it.
The interesting thing to me about that is scale, right? The best case scenario is in person, right? Like you're the master plumber and I'm here learning this trade. Let's connect and let's do this. But that doesn't scale, right? And now with the internet, with technology, with what we're doing right here on this call, right? We're in 3 different locations. You're also talking about tuning into the shop in Bozeman from Boise and having direct control over the machines. Is you've now got this broadcast scenario potential, right? One to many, right? And you have this interaction, but you can have a huge number of people tuning in to watch and learn that in real time from the source, from the person who is the master plumber, to do that right there. I think it's really incredible, and that you can run all this software from that. So is VR magical here in this scenario? Not really, except it enables this whole thing to scale, and it enables you to connect from anywhere to anywhere and feel like you're actually immersed in the situation, not just watching it on a small screen like on your phone, right?
It gives me a medium to convey the vision of it so that someone other than me can build that, build that platform to be able to communicate so I can get that done, right? Like we've looked at like Resolve BIM. Angel says amazing over there. I think he's probably going to be the one to pull something like this off. But being able to have that platform that leverages our data to work with it, to pass it through those systems. We've built the network of fabrication shops. Now we just plug it into that headset and we're ready to roll, right? Or even just the network of people that are fabricating. So that's moonshot. Always have to scale it back to reality that we're using tape measures and Sharpies, right? So got to scale it before we can get there. But it's just an interesting way of us being able to convey that vision.
It's a cool thing. Brett, I have a question for you, being the product manager for this, and just talking about kind of why you guys chose the web. I know there's a lot of there's both sides to that argument, right? Doing it on machines versus in the cloud or on the web. And I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that side of it and what that's enabled you guys to do.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that the decision on the WebSocket was actually developed before I got here. However, it was new. So while it wasn't necessarily my idea, it was thought of by Brian and Kyle. It is something that I immediately recognized as extremely valuable, and something that me personally, I have a unique perspective on a lot of my projects, because my projects that I worked on were always prefabbed, very far away from where they were being built, shipped to where they were being built. And one of the things is solving the problem of localization for a prefab operation. And what I mean by that is that if you want to scale prefabrication, the easiest, and I'm sure there's someone out there that has done this, but I'm sure it's very difficult to prefab one large project from 3 to 5 addresses, right? So, you get a project, you're doing something like a 20-story hotel, and you've got 3 5,000 square foot shops, not a 25,000 square foot shop. So the first thing you got to do is you got to start thinking about your resources, right? In a desktop bound environment, the connection between those 3 shops and the communication is going to be Excel and IT heavy at best. And that's if you have a very good team doing it, right? As to where with the decision that they made beforehand, it allows it to where everything's automatically labeled and you cannot possibly step on the toes of each other. Even if shop 1 is doing, 1 through 2 inch, shop 2 is doing 2 through 4, and shop 3 is doing 4 and up. in terms of like conduit sizes or something of that nature. So the integration of the data and the way that the UPCs, the QRs, the package labels sort themselves out, allow them to be shipped and not confused, I think is something that's often overlooked about the difference between desktop and web-based software, mostly because no one's tried that yet or has tried it on a large scale. So we'll see how that goes over the next few years. I have high hopes, but I've been wrong before, but we'll see. So that's kind of my take. Brian, am I on base with what you're thinking?
What I really am glad that Brett just narrated there is just that a lot of these shops have 3 to 5 different buildings that perform different sequences of operations. One might be mechanical, one might be electrical, one might be plumbing, one might have electrical split up between, different sizes all the way out to different racking systems. And the beauty of that web environment and answering your question, Evan, about why we chose web, is we have an internet system, right? So because every shop has a computer, it's much easier for a guy to open up a web browser and create a simple interaction than it is to have him download and install and find his serial code to install a C# desktop application, right?
Yeah.
And so what we've done is we've simplified it on different medians to where they can run it on the iPad, they can run it on their iPhone, they can run it on just a standard computer. And now that all those stations have been identified, it's rolling out a map of all of those workstations for an overall metric system to be able to understand what's happening at each work cell, at each machine. And it gives us data that traditionally is lost through that export. When the moment you export a model, you've immediately just vomited, all this information that has no traceability. And even if you can import it, there's data loss, right? And it's just a nightmare, right? This is all connected. It all communicates. There's no data loss. It's all being put into one central core.
And Brian, I mean, the only reason I was going to jump in there, and I'll be real quick, right? Classic problem in our industry. Hey, BIM changed something. What'd they change? Disassembly. Well, it's sitting right there.
Yeah. Already made it.
Already made it, right? So what are we going to do?
Yeah.
This is a huge solver of that problem. And that was really the only point I wanted to bring up there.
And again, I just want to kind of I'll give you a moment to, and we'll have a link to a video where people can actually see the Allied BIM connection, what that actually means. But it's more than a spreadsheet. It's a 3D interactive. You're clicking on, or maybe in VR, touching parts, spinning models to fully understand what is being sent to the fabrication shop, right? There's a level of fidelity there to give me the peace of mind that what has been modeled, or maybe what is the intention of the design, is actually being sent to the shop. I get to see it, and I can actually see what the parts are. And I can look for red flags because as a human, I have really great pattern recognition by visually inspecting what's going on. Maybe I don't need to go through all of the parts list on my end to do that, but that due diligence would need to be done on the other side. But it just gives that kind of more accountability in the system at a really high fidelity, right, to enable the best product to be produced in the end.
You bring up an incredible point there. Is that most of these shops are putting out 2-dimensional paper drawings with a 3D isometric in 2D format on the sheet, reference to a schedule on what to cut. And I can't tell you how many times we've sent that out.
There's no mistakes there. You can't mess that up.
He's looking at it and he's like, what does this say? He's got to interpret that drawing. Right. And so the beauty of showing the 3D model is the interpretation is through the connection out to those positioners to cut. The interpretation is out towards those generated files to bend. So that interpretation layer goes away. It's more of a QA QC process of saying, check, that looks correct. Let's let the work cell do the work.
Nice. Very cool. Is there anything that we've missed here? I again will just reiterate that there will be some links in the show notes that you can click on to watch some videos on the types of facilities that you're talking about, but also the software and kind of the interactivity of through the VR potentially, as kind of a future statement of what it might be like to work in these, but also just showing kind of what the software is doing. What else? Is there anything else that we need to say before we wrap up here?
I'd just like to say thank you, Evan, for, hosting and for bringing us on your show. I've been a listener for quite some time. I love the content that you're putting out. Really, really appreciate the time that you've gone through our product today. And for anybody that's listening that would like to get in touch with us, feel free. Brett and I are very approachable. We enjoy conversations just like what we had today. And we also like learning about, other ideas that can kind of further and enhance and better our industry together. I mean, this is an allied pursuit. We're building industry alliance status, like with different, disciplines in mechanical, electrical, plumbing. This is truly a collaborative effort, and we can't do it without a network. This is our network.
Nice. And I wanted to give you guys a chance to plug your show too. So I definitely talk about that if people want to learn more and do a deeper dive into this particular kind of content.
Yeah, I'll let Brett kind of came up with Fab, and I would love for Brett to kind of explain what we're doing there, because it's really exciting. And it's focused on an area of the industry that's generally less understood from the design intent through the fab side. And I think it gives us kind of a place to showcase that. But I want Brett to kind of cover that. Thanks, Brett.
Yeah, it was a whole bunch of things that came together. One is that we're a fan of a lot of podcasts. We both watch upwards of 3 or 4 a piece, and we truly generally like them. One of the things that we wanted to do was cover exactly that sort of design intent through the beginning of fabrication, because it's an area that usually you're talking about BIM or you're talking about fabrication. You're never talking about the interface of the two. And that was something that RCN always did really well, was the interface of BIM and surveying and reality capture. And it's a super important area. So that is where we kind of like to live. We do it live. A couple reasons we do it live is because we don't have time to edit it. And, there are a lot of people that do a much better job than Brian or I could do. So we just don't even try to compete in that area. Right. So we make mistakes. We go live. And yeah, I mean, it's just really, it's really based on that interface. And the term fab came from a lot of conversations we had, and it was actually a goofy conversation where it's an abbreviation of fabulous fabrication is essentially what that name means. And it was snappy. It hashtagged really well. All of the internet analysis said that it was a good SEO opportunity. And so that is how we ended up with it. And it's fun. We don't do it as often as we would like, most likely because we're chasing funding. But once we staff up and stuff, we hope to make it a very regular thing. And our next episode should have a very important client that has stepped through this process with us. So as long as they agree to come on, our next episode should be very insightful for anyone that's thinking about doing this.
He has agreed. So Austin Brunner from England Stubbs is joining us. But yeah, the grittiness of it is why we like doing it live. It's like, we're in a shop in a live environment working and stuff happens. And so we like to kind of fit that mantra of this is live, we're human. Like we're not going to, we're off the cuff. Like if we screw up, we screw up.
Yeah.
We're still waiting on our first ban. We haven't been banned from anything yet, so that's good.
Yes, correct. No bans.
Well, I will put links for people to connect with both of you in the show notes as well, so they actually can get in contact if they want to learn more or talk through kind of what you've been working on at a deeper level. Thank you both for taking the time today to tell the story of Allied BIM and what you've been up to, and it's really exciting. I find it intriguing that you've kind of gone a different direction than a lot of other startups in this space. Like, you're going directly to the trades and solving those problems between design and fabrication, right? And that to me is just that's a sweet spot for you guys to be in. Obviously, your passion is there. So thank you for doing that and for telling that story today on the show. Yeah, great to have you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Evan.